summer, the island of Sodor gleams in the sun and every station is filled with flowers. Percy had been working at the docks all day and was tired of the smell of fish. Phew. "Come on, Percy," said his driver. "Time to go home." "Please, sir, can I have a wash down first?" "Sorry, Percy, there isn't time. The Fat Controller is waiting for us at the sheds." "There is to be a festival of flowers," announced the Fat Controller. "This sign saying Best Rest Station will be awarded to the winner. Please help with the arrangements." The engines were excited. "My favourite station is Farquhar," said Thomas. "Mine's Maithwaite," said Toby. "Percy, what's yours?" Percy was too tired to think properly. "The docks," he murmured. "Huh," sniffed Thomas. "We can tell." Toby laughed. "The docks are full of fish, not flowers." "All right then, Alsdale End," said Percy. "That's my home," replied Toby. "That's why I like it, especially when you're there and not here saying I'm silly. Good night." Next morning, Percy was proud to be sparkling again. His train of trucks were being loaded with vegetables and flowers. "These are for Maithwaite," said his driver. "They'll display them on the platform." On the way, Percy saw Harold. "Why is Harold buzzing about?" he puffed. "I haven't time for a race today." "What's that?" said his driver. "Why, bless me, it's a ram." "Now we'll be late. I should have known that Harold was trying to tell us something." "I've got just the ticket to get him off the track," cried the fireman. "Food." He found some cabbage leaves. The ram chomped happily away. "Please, can we go now?" When Percy arrived at the station, his driver told the station master what had happened. "I've heard about this ram. He's always hungry." A little while later, the station was decked with flowers. Maithwaite will definitely win first prize, decided Percy. He left his coaches and went to a siding where no one could see him. Time for a snooze, he thought. But it wasn't. "We'd better see what all that noise is about," said his driver. Percy was shocked. Flowers, fruit and vegetables were scattered everywhere. "It's that ram. He's made a meal of the station too." Then there was trouble. "We can't get into the waiting room," the passengers cried. "Why not?" asked the station master. "The ram won't let us." Everyone looked at the ram, and the ram looked at them. "He's not alone," exclaimed Percy's driver. "Let us out, please," begged the boys. "We're very sorry." "Well, look at that," said the station master. "The boys are our culprits, not the ram. He was just making sure they did no more damage." "We thought it would be fun, but it wasn't. We'll help put everything back." A few days later, the Fat Controller invited some of the engines to Maithwaite, winner of the Best Dressed Station Award. "I'm sorry, Toby," whispered Percy. "You made the right choice." Then the Fat Controller made an announcement. "There is one more prize for our good friend the ram. Here it is. I'll eat my hat if you don't like it." Then Harold landed. The wind from his blades blew the Fat Controller's hat off. "Well," said the Fat Controller, "seems I wouldn't be able to eat my hat even if I had to." Everyone laughed, and the only sound from the ram was a contented hiccup. Percy puffed grumpily into the yards. He was feeling put upon and said so. "I feel put upon," he complained to Thomas. Thomas was confused. Put upon what? The rails? "No, put upon with too much work. Driver says he is too." "Put upon? "What a silly saying," replied Thomas. But Annie and Clarabel liked it, and when Thomas took them away, they sang about it. "Percy's been put upon, put upon, put upon. Percy's been put upon, poor old Percy. Tee-hee-hee-hee-hee. Percy is being put upon. I am, I am, I am." He collected metal from the foundry, coal from the yards, flour from the mills, rock from the quarries, and fuel from the depot. Then he delivered it all to the docks. Next, he collected some empty trucks. "Who's this dirty little engine?" cried the trucks. "We want Thomas or Duck." Percy ignored them. Put upon, that's what I am." That night, all the engines laughed at him. "We can see what's been put upon you," said Thomas. "Silence! Percy, you've done a good day's work. Now get a good night's rest," said the Fat Controller. "Yes, sir, thank you, sir." Next morning, he took some trucks to the coal yards. Then he had to push empty trucks to the mine shaft. When he arrived, there was trouble. The foreman spoke to his driver. "The trucks are stuck on the mechanism. All they need is a good shove. We'll do it right away." Percy shunted back to where a large canvas barrier was used to protect his line from loose rocks. Percy charged at the line of trucks, too fast and too hard. "Oh no!" gasped Percy. The trucks broke free, but ran out of control to the mines below. On, faster, faster!" the silly trucks yelled. Then there was trouble again. "Get out of here fast! The mine's collapsing!" "We'll just have to make a run for it, Percy," called his driver. "There's going to be an avalanche," wailed Percy. And he was right. Worse still, the track he was on began to crumble. Then he remembered something he had seen earlier. "There's a canvas barrier by the track. That might save us." They were just in time. Percy was right. The canvas did indeed save them, but the miners didn't know that. "The avalanche has buried an engine and its crew. We must help them immediately." When Percy had been rescued, the Fat Controller spoke to his driver and fireman, then to Percy. "Driver told me how brave you were, Percy, and I'm very proud of you. As a reward, you will be repainted at the works." "Oh, thank you, sir." When he returned, Percy's green coat glistened in the sun. "I'm sorry we teased you, Percy," said Thomas. "You were certainly put upon by that avalanche." "Yes, indeed, but just look at my new coat of paint. Now, I don't mind that being put upon me." It had been raining hard for weeks. Toby was feeling miserable. Everywhere was wet, wet, wet. His branch line runs through a village. The water in the river had risen with the rain. Only the great wall known as a dam was stopping the water from overflowing. Percy arrived just as Toby was about to inspect the dam for any damage. "Driver tells me it may be dangerous up there. Please be careful, Toby," said Percy. "I'll try," replied Toby bravely. Percy watched anxiously as Toby trundled away. His journey took him over a wooden bridge at the end of the village. The river surged dangerously beneath it. Harold Helicopter was inspecting the dam as Toby arrived. "Be brave, Toby," called his driver. "We have to cross to the other side." The dam did not look safe at all. Toby was very worried, and soon he knew why. "The dam's breaking up! We must warn everyone!" Toby shunted back as fast as his wheels would let him. Percy was waiting anxiously for Toby by the bridge. The river had risen so high that the bridge was in danger of collapsing. Toby arrived. "The dam's breaking up! We must find high ground!" shouted Toby's driver. "Your only chance is to cross the bridge," called Percy. "It doesn't look safe to me," wailed Toby. "It's our only chance," said his driver. "If the dam breaks, we'll be done for." Toby was halfway across the bridge when disaster struck. "Help!" called Toby. "We'll follow him on our line. It meets the river further down." As Toby floated helplessly on the floodwaters, they passed a sign that made them shudder. "Beware the waterfall." "If we go over that waterfall, we're doomed." Then they saw Harold, who swooped low and shouted urgently to them. "We're going to drop a rope to you. Attach it to yourself, quickly now." And they did, to one of Toby's buffers. Just then Percy arrived. Harold flew over to him. "Catch the rope and pull Toby to safety." Toby was safe at last. When the floods were over and the dam mended, the villagers had a big party for Toby, hosted by the Fat Controller. "You were very brave, Toby." "Thanks to Harold, sir," Toby replied. "I could never have been so brave, Toby." "Oh, I'm sure you would be, but you never know till you've tried." Percy rather hoped he'd never have to. It was a moonlit night and Henry was working with Edward. The big green engine was taking a goods train to the station by the lake. "Whenever that owl hoots, a mist rolls in," murmured Edward. "There's a legend that when the mist's about, there's a ghost about too. Take care on the old line, Henry." "Stupid bird," said Henry. "Owls, mists, ghosts. Edward's going soft in the boiler. There's no mist." But Henry was wrong. "What's that?" cried Henry. "It's an amber lamp," murmured his driver. "That means proceed with caution." "Who's there?" No one replied. Henry crept slowly forward. He stopped by a tree. It had a sign nailed to it, "Beware of the viaduct." The driver was surprised. No one warned us about that before, and look, the signal's red and the gates are closed. And there's a fogman's coat. But where's its owner? Then they saw a light move within the station building. Ghosts! Exclaimed Henry. Edward was right. Something very strange is happening, said his driver. I think it's best we go back. So do I, agreed Henry. By morning, the mist had cleared. A workman was talking about the unsafe viaduct. Lucky you didn't cross it last night. Yes, but we don't know who warned us, replied Henry's driver. Later that day, he spoke to Henry. The viaduct has been repaired. We can take our train back along the old line tonight. Henry didn't really want to. But when nightfall came, he was sizzling nicely. Suddenly, an owl hooted, and then Gordon thundered by. Oh, look! Henry's spooked, said a truck, and the others giggled in their silly way. Be quiet, snapped Henry. I'm not scared. But he was. A little later, the fog came down. As they approached the same area, they saw the amber light again. Here we go, said Henry's driver. Then, unbeknown to Henry, the gates mysteriously closed by themselves, and the signal went red. The trucks had seen all, and they were spooked too. Faster, faster, there's a ghost about! Stop! Stop! Yelled Henry. A mysterious figure watched Henry go by. Ahead was a landslide blocking the line. Henry braked hard, but the trucks hit some of the rubble and plunged into the ravine. Just then, Henry's driver saw a strange sight coming towards them. What's that? He said. The fireman laughed. That's our ghost. It's old Bailey, the fogman. Old Bailey was very cross. I tried to warn you about that viaduct. Why didn't you pay attention? We're sorry we ignored your warnings, replied the driver. Is there anything we can do to thank you? I'd like to operate that old station again, if you let me. I promise I won't spook Henry. And in a little while, old Bailey's wish was granted. You and your station will be really useful, said the Fat Controller. Let's hear a hearty thank you to the friendliest, ghost on the island. Everyone cheered, especially Henry, who was the happiest of all. Bill and Ben, the tank engine twins, work in the clay mines and quarries near Brendam Docks. Their work is important, but it can be hot and dirty. Sometimes this makes the twins naughty. One morning, they were feeling very naughty indeed. That's my line of trucks, huffed Bill. Snot, it's mine, snorted Ben. Yours is over there. It's mine, snot, it's mine, snot. Their friend Boko was worried. Stop quarrelling, you two, or the only thing you'll have left to share is trouble. Silly, snapped Bill. Silly yourself, grumbled Ben. Bill and Ben, behave yourselves or I shall send you to your sheds, said the Fat Controller. It is also clear to me that we need another diesel to help out. There is only one available. He's new and keen to make an impression. If I were you, whispered Boko, I'd get back to work right away. Meanwhile, the Fat Controller was having doubts about his own decision. I hope the new diesel doesn't cause even more confusion. He's bound to have teething troubles. And he was right. Oh my, grease and oil. I wasn't expecting this hill. Oh, what's that? His wheels spun and then there was trouble. Boko came to the rescue. Sorry, said the diesel. I'm all hot and bothered. Got teething troubles, you know. The news soon spread down the line. Apparently it's teething troubles, confided Thomas to Percy. Hey, you two, this new diesel's got toothache. Good luck. Why does Percy want to wish us good luck? Asked Bill. Because he knows we'll need it. A diesel with toothache must be the worst diesel of all. Then their manager spoke to them. You will take your load to the docks and rest there tonight. There's hard work to do tomorrow. It was dark when the twins reached the docks. They left the trucks by the quay and scurried off to the shed. You do look glum, sighed Duck. It's the new diesel's fault, replied Bill. He's got toothache. Toothache, he's got teething troubles. That means he's new, and this causes some problems. In his case, it's his cooling system. Next morning, as the twins were preparing to take a long train of trucks away, they heard an unfamiliar whistle. Oh no, it's the new diesel. And it was. Hello. I'll soon sort this train out. You take the front and I'll push from behind. What fun. All went well as they set off. Then they came to a hill. Come on, push harder, you silly diesel, shouted Ben. But the diesel couldn't push any harder. And then it happened. I'm overheating again. Oh, pa, snorted Bill. You know what, sighed the driver. Let's try and finish the journey anyway. It means we'll have to pull diesel as well. Can you do it, twins? We'll try. And they could. That night, the Fat Controller came to see them. Well, John, Bill and Ben, I've sent the new diesel back to the works. Can you manage alone? Oh, yes, sir. Boko, whispered Bill, I'm sorry we were rude to you. And, added Ben, the new diesel was really quite friendly. And you know what friends do, murmured Duck. Know what, they asked. They always say goodnight to each other. And so they did, but they still chatted about teething troubles all night long. Stepney, the Bluebell engine, works closely with his friend Rusty. One day, the Fat Controller came to see him. Rusty tells me you're in need of change, so I want you to help Toby and Mavis in the quarry. Oh, thank you, sir, said Stepney. Shall I be away long? Just today, replied the Fat Controller. But please be careful, it's easy to get lost up there, so be back before dark. We will, said the driver. Stepney soon arrived at the quarry. We're glad you're here to help us, said Toby. Are those my trucks? Asked Stepney eagerly. Only some of them. There's masses more in the sidings, replied Mavis. The more the merrier, whistled Stepney. Stepney was really enjoying himself. The dustier he became, the harder he worked. Mavis and Toby were impressed. The quarry foreman spoke to his driver. We have a night special to take to the building site at the new branch line. Do you want to pull the train? Yes, please, said the driver. But he should have asked the Fat Controller first. Night came. Be careful, Stepney, advised Toby. I will, and thank you for a lovely day. I do hope I can come back again. The line can be spooky, said Mavis. Thank you for the warning. And with that, Stepney puffed away into the night. Stepney arrived on time and made the delivery of rock and stones for the workmen. Then he set off for home. That's when the trouble began. The fog came down. Mavis was right. Suddenly, everything does look spooky. There's a signal box. And the signal light is green. Someone must have been expecting us. But they hadn't. The points had been set in the wrong direction, but Stepney didn't realise this. Home, here we come, he thought. Then they approached an unknown area. The driver made a decision. It's best if we rest here until the fog clears. What are those strange sounds, wondered Stepney. Then the fog slowly lifted. Oh no, wailed Stepney, we're in the scrapyards. His driver and fireman went for help. Stepney was all alone, but not for long. 2 diesels approached. Got you this time, Stepney. You'll make very fine scrap indeed. Buffer him, Bert. The diesels took him to the large smelter's shed. Bye-bye, Stepney, said the diesel. Stepney looked up. Above him was a huge grabber. This engine's not for scrapping, shouted Stepney. The grabber wasn't listening. But just as it was about to grab hold of him, it stopped. There stood the Fat Controller. It's a good thing I've chosen to visit this yard tonight. Saving you from scrap is getting to be a habit, Stepney. Please stop it. Yes, sir, but I have learned something. What's that? There's no place like home. And that's exactly where you're going now. Bluebells forever, sighed Stepney. One morning, the Fat Controller and his grandchildren came to see Toby. Come on, Toby, we're all going to Seaside. We will ride in Henrietta. Yes, sir, said Toby happily. They came to a small seaside station. Soon, the children were playing in the sand, building a splendid castle. The Fat Controller inspected it. My word, that's a very fine castle. Have you seen a real one like it? Yes, replied the children. It's here on the island. And they showed him a map. Pondered the Fat Controller. They met Toby at the harbour. Come on, we're going exploring. It will be a great adventure. Soon they were in the wildest part of the island. They stopped by a lonely signal box. Where might you be going then? Asked the signalman. We're trying to find an old castle, replied the Fat Controller. I know the place, sir, said the signalman. There's a small junction not too far down the line. Just switch the points. When the firemen switched the points, their adventure really began. Toby pushed past branches and bushes till they came to another little junction. There they saw 2 old signs. One read to the castle and the other to the mine. We'll go to castle first. Toby stopped by an old water tower. There's the castle. Yes, replied the Fat Controller, and now we shall visit the mine. Once upon a time, the mine had been worked by the little engines and their lines were still in place. But now everything was very rusty and overgrown. The fat controller was most impressed, but Toby was rather scared. He was glad when it was time to go home. I think the castle and the mine will make a very fine place for visitors, but it will take a lot of hard work first. Yes, sir, said Toby nervously. The fat controller's plans were soon put into action, but Toby was still worried. I'm sure this place is haunted, he said to himself. It's our turn to stay here on guard tonight, Toby. Oh, yes, why not? Stuttered Toby. Beware of the ghost, Toby, Thomas said. What ghost? Asked Toby. The old warrior ghost. Every night he lights his fire, then goes hunting. Toot toot, goodbye, Thomas replied. Night came. Toby looked anxiously around. Everything seemed rather spooky. Quite suddenly, he heard a strange wheezing sound. It's the ghost, he wailed. What ghost? His driver asked. It's the old warrior. He's come to hunt me down. Don't be so daft. We'll go and investigate. They returned quite soon. The old warrior wants to meet you, laughed his fireman. Can't he wait till morning? Replied Toby. Ghosts don't work day shifts, said his driver. Toby bravely made his way. Well, bless my bell, he exclaimed. There in front of him was a little old engine. This is your ghost, Toby, said the signalman. His name's really Bertram, but we call him the old warrior because he's so brave. Bertram and Toby are now firm friends. They take the visitors to the splendid castle and the mine. If there are any ghosts here, they certainly help to make the place very happy. One day, Thomas was at the quayside of a small village. The early morning catch of fish was being loaded into his trucks. The work took a long time. The fishermen were using old equipment and Thomas was worried. I'm going to be late for Henry at the docks. He won't like this. Please hurry up and... Thomas was rudely interrupted. His driver and fireman laughed. Phew, sniffed Thomas. What a pong! He was glad when they were speeding along the beautiful coastal run. As they approached the lighthouse, they saw a man waving a red flag. What's the matter now? High tides are damaging the track, reported the man. I've marked the spot. We'll go and inspect, said the driver. It would be dangerous for heavy engines like Henry, agreed the driver, but for Thomas it's safe enough. The guard left a red oil lamp by the damaged track to warn engines. When we get to the docks, I'll tell them to close the line. Henry was waiting anxiously for Thomas's trucks. Why, you're late and that smell is making me ill. I can't help it, it's the fish, replied Thomas. And there's danger on the rails, that's why we're late. You're the only danger on the rails, Thomas. Now stop wasting time and get your trucks hitched to my train. Thomas's driver and fireman were in the yardmaster's office when they heard Henry's whistle. There he was, steaming out of the station with his long, heavy train called the Flying Kipper. What route is Henry taking tonight? Asked the driver. The coastal run, it's the quickest. But I told you, that's dangerous for a big engine like Henry. The yardmaster quickly phoned the signalman. Henry roared past the signal box. I'll soon make up for lost time. The signalman was answering the telephone but couldn't hear the warning. By the time he did, Henry was far away in a cloud of steam. But when Henry reached the coastal track, his hopes for a fast run were dashed. Fog floated everywhere. I can't see, cried Henry. Nor could his driver. when he could, it was too late. As soon as the tide was high enough, Henry was craned out of the water. "Engines don't swim, Henry. You were meant to deliver fish, not swim with them," said the Fat Controller. "You should know that by now." "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir." When Henry arrived at the docks, Cranky the Crane looked down at him disdainfully. My, Henry, I expect you'll have some fishy tales to tell, but take my advice, have a long hose down first. "Ha!" hissed Henry, but there was worse to come. "Look," said a child, "they've caught all this fish and a green whale too. It's not a whale, it's a monster." Henry was most upset. Thomas now felt sorry for Henry. "Come on, your driver says it's time for a nice hot washdown. Then you'll feel much better." And Henry did. "I'm sorry I was rude to you, Thomas." "Oh, that's all right. But can you smell something?" What? asked Henry nervously. "Fresh air." "Oh, yes," replied Henry. Thomas, Percy and James were looking at the early morning sky. "Everyone's so much happier when springtime comes," said Thomas happily. "Everyone except the Fat Controller," grumbled James. "He seems to be working us harder than ever. I'm tired of these coastal runs." "He just wants everything to be ready for the holidays," replied Percy. "Anyway, salty air makes me all cheerful in my smoke box." "Ha!" snorted James. "It's the countryside that really gets me fired up. It's the only place to be." And he puffed away to collect his fuel trucks from the docks. Thomas and Percy had to take some empty trucks to the scrapyards. As they were shunting their trucks into a siding, they saw an old coach. She looked very sad. "What are you doing here?" "They called me old slow coach and told me I wasn't useful anymore. Now only the mice ride in me." "Well, you may be dusty, but you look in perfect shape." The yard manager appeared. "Come along, I have trucks for you to take away." "Excuse me," said Percy's driver. "Can you tell us about this coach?" "Old slow coach, she's been here for years. She'll be broken up when we find the time," he replied. The engines were most dismayed. "We'll try and help you," said Thomas, but he didn't know how. Meanwhile, James was enjoying himself. "This is the life," he chortled. But he was heading for trouble. One of the fuel trucks was leaking. And suddenly it caught fire. "Help!" cried James. They reached the siding and his driver gave the alarm. "It's fuel and it's dangerous." As Thomas and Percy approached the junction, they saw the smoke and a guard waving a red flag. "Sparks from James's funnel have set the fuel trucks ablaze," he called. "The firemen have got things under control, but it's quite a mess." "You said the countryside run got you all fired up, James," said Percy. "But I didn't think he meant it in this way." "Ha!" snorted James. "It was the stupid truck's fault, not mine." "It's safe to proceed now," called the fireman. Thomas and Percy puffed slowly by, but now they felt sorry for James. It wasn't long before they reached the station. Later, as they were having a long drink at the water towers, they suddenly heard a commotion. "What's the matter?" Thomas asked. "It's another fire at the workman's hut," replied Thomas's driver. "We'd better see what we can do." The fire engines arrived, but they had a big problem. "We are completely out of water," cried a fireman. "We can't use seawater because it clogs our works. We'll just have to let that building burn." Then Thomas had an idea. Why don't you use the water in our tanks? We've just refilled them. The fireman wasted no time. You're very clever engines, chuckled their drivers. Soon the fire was out, but the hut where the workmen lived was destroyed. We'll need to find something to house the men. They can't sleep on the beach, said the foreman. What about old Slow Coach? She would be perfect for the workmen. Comfy too, added Thomas. What a good idea, Percy, said his driver. They phoned the Fat Controller, who agreed. She'll be spick and span by the time you collect her. And she was, and very happy too. I can't thank you enough, she said. I feel splendid. The engines buffered up to her, and she set off happily for her new home. Everyone agreed there was nothing old or slow about Coach, and she will always be really useful indeed. Thomas the Tank Engine loves his branch line. One day, when he stopped at a small station, some children looked sad. They've closed our playground and our favourite sand pit. Teacher said the sand is soiled and too dirty to play in. Please help us, Thomas, they pleaded. I'll see what I can do, replied Thomas kindly. Thomas hoped things weren't quite as bad as the children had made them out to be. But as he passed their playground, a large sign read, "Playground closed until further notice." The children were right, thought Thomas sadly. He puffed into the yards and was just about to tell the other engines about the playground when Percy rushed in. You look glum, little Percy. What's up? Asked Gordon. The Fat Controller told Driver that he's using Harold to show a special visitor the island instead of using any of us engines. Despicable, said Gordon. Disgusting, snorted Henry. Engines are meant to take special visitors round our island, not that whirly-bird thing, James exclaimed. Gordon was the first to see Harold. Harold thinks he can go faster than me. I'll show him. Next, it was Henry's turn. The Fat Controller has chosen Harold because he thinks he's more important than me. Well, he's not. Harold can't fly through tunnels. Percy stopped by a signal on his branch line near a field where sheep were grazing. Harold hovered for a while, then buzzed away. I know what he's doing, said Percy. He's counting sheep. And he puffed along his line, feeling much better about things. That evening, the engines talked about the situation. Harold wants to get rid of us, said Gordon grimly. He doesn't need tunnels, added Henry. Don't worry, he's just counting sheep, said Percy. Counting sheep? Pah, snorted Gordon. He's counting how many engines he can get rid of. He'll see how useful I am tomorrow. Thomas wanted to mention the children's playground, but solving the mystery of Harold and the special visitor came first. The next day, Gordon was travelling to collect his train. We'll show that whirlybird just how fast you can go, Gordon, said his driver. Because they were watching Harold, they missed a signal and went onto the wrong line. Gordon was travelling to trouble. Ahead was a tunnel under repair. His driver reduced steam and braked hard. But it was too late. Later, Thomas pulled Gordon clear with the breakdown train. The Fat Controller spoke severely to Gordon's driver about the accident. Will Gordon be scrapped, sir? Asked Thomas sadly. What makes you think that? Said the Fat Controller. Thomas decided to pluck up courage. Because the engines think the special visitor is here to see if we can be replaced by Harold, he replied. The fat controller laughed. Ho, ho. Well, the engines are wrong and you shouldn't listen to rumours, Thomas. This gentleman is making a new playground for the children. It was easier to find a suitable site from up in the air. And what's more, said the special visitor, that tunnel sand will be perfect for the playground. Found by accident and rumour, you might say. The fat controller still uses Harold to fly above the island. But all the engines know that Harold isn't spying on them. He is, in his way, just being very useful. Oliver and his brake van Toad liked working in the big yards, but one morning Toad noticed that Oliver was unhappy. He decided to find out why. Excuse me, Mr. Oliver, it seems to me that things are not well with you, if you forgive me for mentioning it. You're quite right, Toad, replied Oliver. All I do is shunt these trucks onto the turntable. I long for a nice run. It's what an engine really needs. Quite so, Mr. Oliver. May I suggest that you speak to the fat controller about your problems? Oliver just grew unhappier. And he was rough with the trucks. You're no good, Oliver. You're dangerous. We want Percy. Pah. Percy's far too busy to be bothered with the likes of you. And he bumped the trucks hard. You silly engine, shouted a workman. It'll take a long time to repair this turntable, which will cause confusion and delay. That night, the fat controller came to see Oliver in his shed. Oliver, you have caused confusion. I thought you could control trucks. You shall work the mail train for a while. Maybe the night air will clear your smoke box. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, said Oliver sadly. Cheer up, old chap, said his driver. The mail train run is a grand run for a fine engine like you. Oliver smiled, but he still felt he'd let everyone down. His driver took them along the coastal run with the mail train. The sea was calm and the fresh air couldn't help but brighten Oliver's spirits. They made good speed until it was time to collect some important mail from Harold the helicopter. Come on, Harold. They waited and waited. At last, Harold landed. Sorry I'm late, Great Western. Had a bit of a problem with one of my arms. Kept letting me down when I was meant to be up. You know how it is, said Harold. We know that we'll be late for our first run, replied Oliver's driver. Soon they were on their way again. Ahead was a red signal light. Oliver didn't realize that the signalman had dozed off waiting for them. Oliver whistled several times, but the signal stayed red. There must be something wrong with that signal. We'll go slowly and stop by the signal box, said his driver. But they never reached it. The points before the signal box were switched to an old track. They were going the wrong way. Oliver's fireman was concerned. We need to find a water tower soon. Instead, they saw an old rundown station. Disaster lay ahead. Meanwhile, the fat controller was very worried. Oliver has not returned. We had better send out a search party. Soon he was high in the sky with Harold. There they are. It wasn't Oliver's fault, sighed the driver. I'm aware of that. I'm just glad you are all safe. Then he saw something. It was an empty old house beside the station. He went to inspect it. When he returned, he spoke to Oliver. Oliver, you have found another attraction for our island. We'll make this house as good as new and visitors can come and have tea and crumpets there. Sighed Oliver happily. Getting lost can be interesting, but being found is much nicer, especially when it makes an engine feel really useful. The engines on the island of Sodor love holiday time. Percy was taking some trucks to the docks. Terence the tractor was working in a field close to the line. Hello, Percy. Nice day for it, isn't it? Percy was confused. Nice day for what? Mrs. Kindly's daughter is getting married today. Oh, yes, of course, said Percy. But when Percy saw Mrs. Kindly, she was standing by her gate waving a red flag. What's the matter? Asked the driver. I've forgotten about the good luck package for the bride. Percy was puzzled. What's a good luck package? It must contain something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. Can you help, please? Percy didn't know how, but his driver was determined. We'll certainly try. Percy had to stop at Edward's station to take on water. We've got to find a good luck package. Do you know what it is? Asked Percy. Oh, yes, indeed. Something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue, Percy cut in. But where do we find them? Edward smiled. They're probably staring you in your smoke box. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to fetch my special train. I'm taking guests to the wedding. When Percy arrived at the docks, he looked all around him. Suddenly, he saw a truck. It was loaded with a new set of shiny buffers. Look, there's something new. You're quite right, Percy, said his driver. Those buffers are just the ticket. I'll speak to the foreman. He returned shortly. Foreman said we can use them and borrow the truck as well. So that's two things we found. Something borrowed and something new. But what about the other things? I'm sure we'll find them too. Now we'd best be on our way. Soon they reached Tidmouth Halt. As Percy was shunting some more trucks into a siding, he heard a voice. Hello, Percy. There was old Slowcoach, who he and Thomas had rescued from scrap. You're it, squeaked Percy. I'm what it, said the coach. There's something old for the wedding, and Percy explained. Now, we only have to find something blue, but what and where? You'll see, said his driver. Percy's unusual train was on its way. At last, they reached the village where the wedding was to take place. Ahead was an old engine shed. What do you think of this, Percy? Laughed his driver. Well, bust my boiler. Thomas, what are you doing here? I'm the something blue, replied Thomas. Now, Percy, said his driver, Mrs. Kindly's chosen you to be her special guest. When the bride and groom left the church for the party, the fat controller addressed everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present a good luck package? Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. All found by Percy and his crew. The engines whistled and everyone cheered. Thank you, Thomas. And thank you, Percy, said the bride. It's the best good luck package ever. And she kissed Percy. Thomas laughed as Percy blushed bright red. I love weddings, whispered Percy that night. Did you like your kiss? Replied Thomas. But Percy was embarrassed and pretended to be asleep. One day, the Fat Controller arranged with Thomas the Tank Engine to take his wife and grandchildren to the seaside. The sun shone and everywhere looked splendid. But Lady Hatt was feeling hot and tired. She took her troubles out on Annie and Clarabel. "Those coaches are old and uncomfortable. Why don't you use them as beach huts instead?" Thomas was most upset. "You won't let them turn Annie and Clarabel into beach huts, will you?" "Of course not, Thomas," replied his driver. "But I must admit they could be smartened up." The next day, the Fat Controller used Percy to take his family to Harold's airfield. They were just about to board Harold when it happened. "What? Where's that?" gasped the Fat Controller. "That's Tiger Moth," grumbled Harold. "It's rude and flies much too low." "So I can see. Please take us up, Harold, before there's another disturbance." A few days later, Harold arrived at their holiday home with bad news. "It's Tiger Moth," said Harold's pilot. "It's gone missing. Do you wish to join the search with us?" "I think I'd better." "There's Tiger Moth," called the Fat Controller. Then he spoke to the pilot. "You were showing off and flying dangerously. I will speak to your controller and request that you are grounded." "Yes, sir," replied the pilot. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I shall return to my holiday." "Jolly good idea, sir." The Fat Controller had arranged to meet up with Toby and Henrietta to take them somewhere special. They arrived at a small river inlet. "What a beautiful boat!" exclaimed the children. "It's my special treat." The Fat Controller took the helm with his wife beside him. "It's sure nice to be away from the railway for once," he said to her. "And far cleaner," she replied. "But life on the river is very different from that on the rails." The family were enjoying themselves so much that they forgot to watch where they were going. "Botheration," said the Fat Controller. "We're stuck." And they were. Other boats tried to pull them off the mudbank, but it was no use. Percy saw the commotion and stopped. "Is there anything we can do to help?" called his driver. "Yes, indeed there is," replied the Fat Controller. "This is the life, isn't it, dear?" Soon they arrived at a small station. There was Thomas with Annie and Clarabel, who were looking as smart as their new paint inside and out. "My!" exclaimed Lady Hatt. "What splendid coaches! So much more suitable than those old beach huts on wheels." No one said a word. But that evening, Annie and Clarabel spoke to Thomas. "It's very nice to get compliments, but no matter what we look like, we'll always be useful, won't we, Thomas?" "Of course," their friend replied.